In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? Is that reciprocal?
Is that reciprocal?
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, healthcare, pensions, throw them out on the street, because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants. We move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country. And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America.
Well, spoiler alert here today, guys. You're about to see a lot more videos like that. Because when it comes to the Trump tariffs, or frankly, any policy that Trump supports, the Democrats have a major problem. And frankly, there are a million different cases of this, where despite all of their whining and screeching, they're trying to make the biggest deal out of it. They're saying this is Project 2025, or it used to be this is racist, this is xenophobic, it's whatever, it's fascism, it's this or that. Usually, when we're talking about Trump's policies, these are things that at some point in time, Democrats widely supported as common sense ideas, and it's only because Trump has actually been trying to do something instead of just talking about supporting them that the Democrats are so pissed, right? As just one example, to show you what we're talking about here, you got from Representative Adam Schiff, right? And this is the talking point memo that was basically sent out to the entire Democrat delegation on the tariffs today, as you can see. Donald Trump's tariffs, this is their argument, are a $3,800 a year tax on your family. Everything you buy from coffees to cars to clothes is about to get a lot more expensive. So this is the argument they are making, is tariffs are going to raise prices on consumers. Now, look, if you're a member of the Libertarian Party or the Cato Institute, maybe you can make those arguments. But the issue right here is this is coming, of course, from the same exact party that, first of all, if they won the election, would have let the Trump tax cuts expire in 2025, which means your taxes straight up, forget indirect, straight up probably would have gone up by about $4,000 on average anyway. That's number one. Number two, when inflation added massive amounts of extra tax on family, the Democrats, of course, said it was transitory, it was not real, etc. But here is the most hilarious part, okay? Forget the whataboutisms, forget the gotchas. No, straight up, when it comes to tariffs themselves, as you saw in that opening clip, it turns out the Democrats have a very long track record of supporting this type of policy in America. Which, after all, makes sense because Democrats used to be the party of the unions, of the working class. That's the type, tariffs are a protectionist policy that does what? Especially back in the day, even more so than now, I would argue. They primarily protected the interests of the working class, right? Working class union jobs, and apparently Democrats now hate that. So we'll tell you all about that in today's video. And just to be clear, it's a lot more than just Bernie Sanders, okay? Because you could make the excuse that, hey, Bernie is a progressive. He's the exception to the rule. Most Democrats are historically neoliberal. They support these things. And while that might be true and understandable, it's actually not, as we'll show you. Including the Democrat establishment politicians used to be massive supporters of protectionist policies until Donald Trump came along, because the entire Democrat ideology is basically just opposing anything Trump does, including saying that the sky is blue. So, all right, with that said, guys, do us a favor. Before we begin today's video, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. You subscribing is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep doing these videos. And with that said, okay, if you're curious, let's just start off. Again, there's a lot to uncover from this stuff, but let's first begin by playing the full clip of Bernie Sanders explaining back in 2008. He was ahead of his curve, frankly. Why Trump was right about literally everything. Check it out.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, healthcare, pensions, throw them out on the street because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants, we move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country. And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America. But that is the philosophy. And I have to say in that regard, the champion, and he is honest on this one. Senator McCain has been criticized recently for not being the most honest candidate we have seen in terms of his ads and so forth. He has been honest on this one. He is the lead advocate of unfettered free trade. And that's an also important part of this right-wing ideology, that it is good for America that corporations can go to China and bring products back into this country.
Wow. Wow. Talk about making the exact argument for our side, right? He frames it as right wing, whatever. But the truth is, yes, the neoconservatives and neoliberals in both political parties historically supported free trade deals like NAFTA. What did they do, right? They moved a lot of good jobs out of this country. Ironically, in some ways, you could argue they allowed corporate greed, right? Because that's what Bernie cares about. The corporations, the 1%, they allowed them to run up their profit margins while screwing over a lot of American workers in the process. That's true. He's not entirely wrong, right? 2008 Bernie Sanders. But now all of a sudden, what has happened to that version of Bernie Sanders? And again, you know, this is not a shocking clip to dig up, okay? You may remember back from the 2016 election that Bernie Sanders was kind of against the doctrine of free trade. In fact, let's take that path down memory lane to show you this was not one aberration in time. This is something that up until Trump became president, Bernie Sanders used to make a really big deal out of until he went magically quiet about it. Isn't that so funny? Check it out.
Not only did I vote against all of these trade agreements, NAFTA, PNTR with China, and all of those, I was on the picket lines in early 1990s with the unions. We understood what was going on, please. Right. And Secretary Clinton, on the other hand, supported virtually all of these trade agreements, which have turned out to be an unmitigated disaster for working class people in this country.
She's now on your side on this.
Well, she's now on my side on many issues. Yeah. But the question is, where were you when it mattered? And what it mattered in the 1990s was to say, sorry, we're not going to create trade policies which are going to throw millions of American workers out on the street. And by the way, it is not only the loss of millions of jobs because of NAFTA and PNTR with China, where companies are searching for cheap labor around the world. There's something else that we don't discuss, and it's what we call the race to the bottom. Recently, there's been a little bit of an uptick in manufacturing in America. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. But many of these new manufacturing jobs are now paying significantly less than they used to pay 20 or 30 years ago.
It's the global competitive
No, it is trade policies by which corporations are now able to say to workers, look, Chuck, we got a choice. You're either going to take a cut in your wages and your health benefits, or I'm moving to China. What's your choice? It is part of disastrous trade policies. If elected president of the United States, I will significantly change those trade policies.
Now, there's another.
Since the year 2000, we have lost 60,000 manufacturing plants in the United States of America and millions of decent paying jobs.
The simple truth is that workers in this country should not be asked to compete against desperate people around the world who work for pennies an hour. That is wrong. Trade is a concept that is good. We all support trade. But we have got to move away from unfettered free trade, telling American workers in this country they've got to compete against people who make 30, 50 cents an hour, to fair trade in which the middle class and working families of this country get a fair shake.
Yeah, well, here's the recurring theme with Bernie Sanders and all these Democrats is that all they ever did on these issues was talk, right? That's all they ever do is talk, 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 yap, yap, yap. To quote Joe Biden, keep yapping, man. That's exactly what they do, okay? Because the moment that a president, Donald Trump, actually comes along and tries to address the things that, as you can see, Bernie Sanders has fought for his entire career, he has nothing to say, right? Notice ever since 2016, Bernie Sanders has magically just stopped talking about the issue of trade. Why? Because Donald Trump started to talk about the issue of trade, and Bernie basically, I guess, maybe sold out, you could argue, on the issue to appease his own side. I mean, I think that's probably an accurate assessment of it overall. And it's like, you know, people nowadays, his small but loyal cult nowadays that is drastically diminished from what it was back when he was running for president. You know, they argue that Bernie Sanders is a principled guy. He's not scared to stand up to the Democrat establishment and the corporate donors and the greed and all that. And yet, well, you know, I think that's worth noting, right? On an issue like trade, Bernie Sanders has just magically stopped talking about this. Have you noticed that? Right? And right now, as Trump implements many of the tariffs that Bernie Sanders about 10 years ago would have supported, what is he going out and saying? I scrolled through all his social media. He's had nothing to say about the tariffs thus far. In fact, he's still going on about the oligarchs, as you can see, calling Trump and Musk the oligarchy. You've heard this a lot, right? This new talking point. They have endless amount of money. They control our economy, blah, 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 blah.
Thanks very much for joining me. Tonight, we're going to do a bad news, good news routine. So stay with me. We start off with the bad news, which is pretty bad, but we are going to get to a happier ending. Let me begin by just telling you what you already know. And that is that under Donald Trump, this country is hurtling rapidly toward oligarchy, toward authoritarianism, toward kleptocracy, and toward more and more income and wealth inequality.
I want to remind everyone, he just posted this, okay? So this is his response to the tariffs that he supported for a long time. The nationalist, anti-free trade doctrine that, you know, the Democrats are now accusing Trump of supporting. I don't know, kind of funny there. Now, here's the thing. Why I ultimately say all these people do is talk is because, believe it or not, you might say, okay, Bernie is just staying silent on it because why does he have to get involved? No, tonight there was a Senate vote on it, actually. Tonight, the U.S. Senate voted on Trump's Canada tariffs. Apparently, like, some of the people in Congress want to shut it down or block it or whatever, okay? And believe it or not, because of 4 Republican defections, mainly led by Mitch McConnell, as you can see, Mitch McConnell just voted with Senate Democrats to terminate President Trump's tariffs on Canada, 51-48. But here's the interesting thing, right? I've been trying to get an answer on this because I'm like, hey, Bernie, you've always been against the globalist trade doctrine. You've always been in support of tariffs. Did Bernie Sanders show up to the Senate tonight and make a principled stand against the tariffs? Well, I've been trying to look. By all accounts, it appears that Bernie Sanders indeed did vote with the Democrats here. Big surprise. Big, gigantic surprise. I know, right, guys? Okay. But when push came to shove, when it actually came to Bernie Sanders doing something more than talking, because that's all he's ever done his entire career, he just complains. First, he was complaining about the millionaires. Then he becomes a millionaire. He complains about the billionaires. Honestly, the guy is far from some type of principled fighter against the establishment, a populist against both parties. No, the guy is a total grifter and a fraud, okay? And look at that. Isn't that so telling, right? Bernie spent his whole career campaigning against NAFTA. And then when it comes to the tariffs against Canada, the one moment where he could say, I may disagree with the oligarch Elon and Trump on everything, but on this I agree. Nope. Just caves like a little bee, like a little you-know-what. Typical behavior from Bernie Sanders. Nothing new or surprising, frankly. He's done this act for a very long time, goes out and pretends to be some type of independent progressive, and yet on every single major issue, even if he talks about it a little bit, always caves and sides with Chuck Schumer, Hillary Clinton, and the establishment Democrats in the end. Remember that? Okay, he's done it many times. Guy is a coward. Guy is lame. He sucks, okay? And I think that's another example of this. Now, with that said, you could still look at the old videos of Bernie and, of course, say that Bernie is an exception because Bernie is like the progressive Democrat. He has always held some views that are maybe a little bit unorthodox, at least in the traditional Republican Democrat Party, I should say. But that's actually not true because the establishment Democrats likewise have historically been in support of Trump-style tariffs. And notice here, right, in this 1996 video of Nancy Pelosi, you'll come to find she actually sounds a lot like her old pal Donald Trump in this. Check it out.
In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? In terms of jobs, this is the biggest and cruelest hoax of all. The China trade supports 170,000 jobs in the United States, 170,000 jobs, whereas our imports from China support 10 million jobs at least. The fact is that U.S.-China trade is a job loser.
Oh, really, Nancy? You don't say. So let me get this straight. Nancy Pelosi considered it to be a problem that when it came to U.S.-China trade, we had very low tariffs on China, and China has very high tariffs on us. You mean to tell me, wait a minute, Nancy, is that what you would call an imbalanced and unfair trade relationship? Really? And what might be the solution to something like that? Reciprocity? Actually, she said it herself. It's not reciprocal, right? Reciprocity? Are you telling me it seems like common sense policy that if a nation is taxing us, tariffing us with our imports at about 33 to 35%, and that we are responding with only a 2% tariff, that is bad news, right? In the process, comparing the jobs here, we made China rich, right? We made China rich while making ourselves poor. And why is that? Because we were allowing them to come here and enjoy the benefits of free trade and free market capitalism. Okay, good for them. But yet when American companies wanted to say, I don't know, go invest in China, right? Make money back that we can bring back to our country because that's what they're doing for their country. We weren't able to do that. Why? Because the trade terms were not fair. Interesting, Nancy Pelosi, right? Oh, wow. Isn't that funny? But again, here's the difference. She, by the way, just to be clear, is making the exact argument of Donald Trump right now. Reciprocity. It's not a crazy concept. It's actually an easy concept to understand. Frankly, I don't know how anyone could be opposed to reciprocity, okay? Growing up as Americans, we were often taught that equal treatment under the law and justice and fairness are kind of standards of our country, and those are ideals we should all support. Well, that's exactly the economic doctrine we're now, I guess, demanding, you could say, right? Not equal outcomes, but equal opportunities. Hey, that's how it works when you have reciprocity under the law and under taxes, right? Okay. But now what's going on? Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that's important to understand. As the same case is with Bernie Sanders, all that Nancy Pelosi ever did was talk. Yap, keep yapping, man, right? Because they never did anything about this, obviously. The Chinese just got more powerful since 1996. You know, America had several moments, as you can see, like 1996, the 2008 Olympics. There were several like China is going to take over moments in American politics. Nobody really did anything. Now Trump came along and he really spearheaded the movement to actually do something, not just about China, but about a lot of our unequal, unreciprocal trade agreements. And now finally that there's action, now the Democrats are standing up and opposing it, right? That's the difference. And I think, frankly, that's why the political establishment is mad at Trump as a whole, is that he actually is like trying to do stuff, right? They've said a lot of things throughout the years. They've given these speeches on the Senate floor where they'll say something that, you know, I think you might look back 15 years ago and say, hey, look, that actually made sense. That was actually smart. We should have done that. But they did nothing. These are do-nothing politicians. They, frankly, are the ones who are getting rich and powerful and elite from benefiting and basically maintaining the status quo And the truth of the matter is Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Bernie Sanders, I would argue even, none of these people ever wanted to change anything, right? Because in the case of the establishment politicians, you have to imagine that's how they're maintaining their power, is maintaining the status quo. And frankly, I would argue even in the case of someone like Bernie Sanders, again, he was always just a grifter. That's the thing, right? If the system ever actually changed, he wouldn't be able to sit around and cry about the billionaires, right? And how am I going to get attention if I'm not talking about the billionaires? See, it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. Same thing with the BLM, right? They want what to be happening in America, so that way they can be profiting off of it. That's just the truth of the matter. It's a big grift for all these people. Now, with that in mind, we continue here. Because it turns out it's not just old grainy clips from 2008 or 1996. We even have Chuck Schumer here in 2018, once again, sounding a lot like President Trump when it comes to the issue of trade tariffs and specifically, oh, wait a minute, China. And this, by the way, keep in mind, was even in his first term when Trump was president. So now you don't even have the excuse of Trump derangement syndrome unless you want to say it just got magically a lot worse. Okay, here's Chuck Schumer back in 2018.
Look, I think the president's doing the right thing. China has been taking advantage of us for two decades. They're stealing our intellectual property, which means stealing our good-paying jobs. And I, frankly, am closer on this issue, not on many, but on this issue with President Trump than I was with Presidents Bush or Obama, because they did nothing to tell China off. Now, China, of course, will respond. But if they know we're strong and we're not going to back off, they will back off. They have far more to lose than we do. They have a $300 billion trade surplus with us. So I'm looking out, number one, for jobs. If General Electric moves jobs to China, they're not unhappy, but my New York workers in Schenectady are unhappy. And so you can't let the international business companies who don't give a hoot about where their factories are govern this. You have to do what's good for the American worker. Look, I think the president...
Oh, gee, really, Chuck Schumer? You don't say. It's just hilarious. By the way, this is 2018. I never even knew this, okay? I guess props to Chuck Schumer back then for being principled about one thing, okay? About one thing. But you may be asking the question, okay, when it comes to the tariffs today, where does Chuck Schumer stand? Is he still saying this? He's still saying that, hey, we shouldn't just listen to the multinational corporations. We have to consider the interest of America. Well, no, that's not what's happening. Here's Chuck Schumer now recently in response to the Trump tariffs. And as you can see, like most of these characters, kind of sold out, I guess you could say. Check it out.
Yesterday, and I'll focus on the tariffs here. Yesterday, the president made one of the dumbest decisions in history, one that will negatively impact every single American family, every single one. He's walking us into the dumbest and most avoidable recession probably in history. And let's call the Trump tariff tax for what they really are, a huge tax hike on American families. And not just any tax hike, J.P. Morgan called it, quote, the equivalent to the largest tax increase in 1968, since 1968. Here's what Bloomberg said, quote, roughly $2 trillion was erased from the S&P 500 at the start of U.S. trading on Thursday, amid worries that President Donald Trump's sweeping new round of tariffs could plunge the economy into a recession. And it claims more than 80% of the companies in the S&P were trading lower. Stock market has plummeted, retirement savings are tanking, consumer confidence is falling, consumer expectations for the future are historically low. Companies are already announcing layoffs. I saw Stellantis just knocked off was going to fire 800 people, lay them off. All for these Trump tax, the Trump tariff tax. All for that, so they can have more money to reduce taxes on the billionaires. The average American family is going to pay more for everything. For food, for gas, for cars, for groceries, for clothing, for beer, for you name it. It makes no sense. And the bottom line is that they're not fighting for American families. They're just aiding and abetting what they're doing and making it even worse with the Trump tariff tax.
Typical, right? That's just how it always goes. And of course, now we're hearing from Democrats who historically have been the party of protectionism. Okay, that's actually a historic Democrat campaign position, because they used to be the party of the auto workers and the union workers and all that. You know, there's a reason why these Midwestern states, right? You know, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, it's not historically called the red wall. It's called the blue wall. Why is it historically called the blue wall? Because those are the states that used to hold on for Democrats and deliver them the election and deliver them guaranteed electoral votes. Why has that changed? That has changed because of, obviously, I guess you could say, the change in the way the party stands now, right? They no longer stand for these people, but it's hilarious because they still try to sit around and virtue signal and gaslight about it, right? You're seeing this talking point once again come back about the billionaires, as if, because, you know, that's what they say, because Elon Musk is like the one billionaire who supports President Trump. Meanwhile, you have Reid Hoffman, George Soros, like half of Silicon Valley, all these characters, right? All in major support of the Democrats. Let's remember, there's a reason why the Democrats always massively out fundraise, the Republican Party. And yet they're sitting here trying to sell the tariffs as an excuse simply to lower taxes on the billionaires. As if, once again, this is not the political party who was going to let the 2025 Trump tax cuts expire if Kamala Harris won the election, which, if you just literally look at the tax brackets compared to before and after the tax cuts, literally would have raised taxes on every American who makes money. That includes poverty, that includes working class, middle class. Every tax bracket would have gone up. Democrats literally wanted to raise taxes. You know, but it's funny. They ran around the campaign saying, no, we're not going to raise taxes. Actually, if you're going to let the Trump tax cuts expire, you are objectively going to raise taxes. And of course, these are the same people again. This sounds incredibly tone deaf, because who are you to talk about prices? You're the party of the Biden inflation that you said was fake. You know, now said, oh, look at the tariffs. Okay, well, we'll see what happens on that front. All right, with that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.